Bigfoot. Its existence has been rumored for decades. People swear they've seen Sasquatch, as it's known.
Some secrets are buried so deep in the wilderness that they were never meant to be found by human eyes. A trail camera in 2012 caught a massive cone-headed creature sitting in a clearing like it owned the forest.
That's just a very unlikely place to expect an elusive creature like Sasquatch is described as, to venture out into the open in the broad of daylight.
Yeah, about that, the footage was so clear that it caused a total meltdown in the local scientific community. What most people do not realize is that these creatures are not just hiding, they are watching us. We have gathered 7 encounters that are so well documented that even the harshest critics have gone silent. Final identification of the Alberta Giant. When the footage was sent to a team of wildlife biologists for a formal identification, things got even weirder. Most people would expect these experts to just laugh it off as a prank, but that is not what happened. After studying the video for 2 weeks, 3 members of the analysis team actually resigned. They refused to sign their names to any report that tried to label the creature as a bear or a known animal. One of them reportedly told his colleagues that if he identified what was on that screen, he would have to admit a new species of giant primate lives in Canada, and his career could not handle that kind of shock. The footage shows a creature with a very specific cone-shaped head and shoulders that are impossibly wide. We are talking about a frame that looks like it belongs to a professional powerlifter, but stretched out to nearly 8 feet tall. The way the sunlight filters through its fur shows that this is a living, breathing animal with incredible muscle definition. It is not just a blurry blob, but a clear, high-definition look at something the world says is not real. See, the biologists were mostly bothered by the anatomy they saw on the screen. The arms of the creature hung down much lower than a human's would, ending near its knees. Its neck was almost non-existent, because the trap muscles were so huge they connected directly to the back of the head. This matches the descriptions of Sasquatch that have been handed down for hundreds of years, but seeing it on a modern trail camera is a different story. The trapper eventually got so spooked by the whole situation that he took his cameras down and stopped visiting that part of the woods. He said he did not want to see what else was out there if that giant was just sitting around in broad daylight. The mystery of the Alberta trail camera remains one of the most credible pieces of evidence because of the people who walked away from it. It shows that even the experts are terrified when the legend finally steps into the light. The fear felt by those scientists is only the beginning of a much larger story. Unaware hiker and the dark figure. While some people find Bigfoot on stationary cameras, others walk right past them without ever knowing they are being hunted. A popular hiker, known as Desert Sasquatch, was trekking through one of the most remote forests in North America, a place so thick with trees that you can barely see 10 feet in front of you. He had been hiking for 6 hours, pushing deep into a wilderness where cell phones are just useless pieces of plastic. He noticed some weird signs along the way, like fresh claw marks on a tree that were still leaking sap. Most people would turn around right then, but he kept his camera rolling and pushed forward. He was looking for signs of predators, but he never expected to be the one being watched. He filmed the broken branches and the strange silence of the forest, feeling like something was holding its breath all around him. It was not until he got home and started editing his footage that the nightmare truly began. As he looked at the high-definition video on a big screen, he noticed something in the right corner of the frame. There, partially hidden by the thick leaves, was a massive, dark figure. It was standing only 30 yards away from him while he was busy talking to the camera. The crazy part is that when he advanced the video frame by frame, the figure actually moved. It was not a tree trunk or a shadow, but a living creature that was shifting its weight to keep a better eye on him. It moved with a level of stealth that is hands down impossible for something that big. Analysts who looked at the video later pointed out that the creature's shoulders were wider than any human athlete's, and its arms were long enough to reach far past its waist. It was clearly tracking the hiker, waiting to see what he would do next. This is a key detail because it shows these creatures are not just dumb animals, they have tactical intelligence. The figure used the natural cover of the trees to stay almost invisible while the hiker walked right by. It stayed perfectly still when he looked in its direction, and only moved when his head was turned. This kind of behavior is exactly what a high-level predator does when it is studying its prey. The hiker never felt a thing, which is the most terrifying part of the whole encounter. He was completely at the mercy of a giant that could have ended his trip in a split second. When the video was shared online, skeptics tried to say it was just a weirdly shaped bush, but those theories died as soon as the creature repositioned itself in the footage. It shows a level of awareness and camouflage that keeps them hidden, even when we are looking right at them. Deep in the snow, another version of this giant was proving that nowhere on Earth is safe. Legends of the Nepal Mountains. Thousands of miles away from the American forests, another group of explorers was about to witness the impossible in the Himalayan mountains. The people of Nepal have talked about the Yeti for centuries, calling it the thing that walks where humans cannot survive. Most Westerners just thought these were bedtime stories used to keep kids away from dangerous cliffs. But two professional mountaineers changed that when they caught a massive figure moving through a snowstorm at an altitude that would stop a human's heart. They were struggling to breathe, gasping for oxygen in the thin air, and fighting against temperatures that can freeze skin in minutes. Everything about that environment is designed to eliminate life, but something was out there strolling through the white void like it was a walk in the park. The mountaineers looked up and saw a dark shape crossing a steep mountain face. At first, they thought it was another climber from a different camp, but then they realized no human could move that fast in those conditions. The figure was covered in thick, black fur that stood out sharply against the blinding white snow. It did not have any gear, no oxygen tanks, and no heavy coats, just its own natural insulation. It moved with a smooth, heavy stride that showed it was perfectly adapted to the most hostile place on Earth. The men watched in total shock as the creature disappeared into a wall of snow, leaving them alone with their questions. They managed to record some of the movement with their shaking, frozen hands, providing a look at a creature that seems to be a cousin to the North American Sasquatch. The crazy part is how similar the behavior is between these two different parts of the world. Both creatures are massive, covered in thick fur, and seem to go out of their way to avoid direct contact with people. They live in places where humans are just visitors, making their own rules in the shadows. The Himalayan encounter proves that whatever this species is, it has spread across the entire globe and adapted to every environment it finds. Whether it is a dense forest or a frozen mountain peak, these giants are the true masters of the wilderness. The mountaineers were lucky to get away with their lives, but they brought back proof that the old legends are much more than just stories. Back in the States, a different kind of proof was being pressed into the mud. Hunter encounter in the Oregon forest. One of the most intense stories comes from a veteran elk hunter in the Oregon wilderness who spent decades tracking animals through the roughest terrain you can imagine. This was a man who did not believe in fairy tales or exaggerations. He was a straight shooter who knew the woods like the back of his hand. He had made camp in a spot so remote that it took a full day of hiking just to reach the nearest dirt road. There was no cell service and no other humans for miles. He was sitting by his small fire when a 25-pound rock came flying out of the darkness and missed his head by only a few inches. This was not a rock rolling down a hill. It was a projectile thrown with enough force to shatter a skull instantly. The hunter spent the entire night with his rifle in his lap, staring into the black trees and listening to the sound of heavy footsteps circling his tent. When the sun finally came up, he went out to find whatever had attacked him. He did not find a person or a bear, but he found something much worse. Deeply pressed into the thick mud were footprints that were nearly twice the size of a human foot. They had a clear arch and 5 toes, showing a perfect bipedal shape that matches a giant primate. The depth of the prints showed that whatever made them weighed at least 800 pounds. The hunter followed the trail for a bit and realized the creature had been following a group of elk, but it stopped to deal with him first. The rock was not an accident. It was a tactical warning. The giant was telling the hunter that he had walked into a hunting ground where he did not belong. Researchers who looked at the photos of the prints were amazed by the scale. We are talking about a stride length that no human could ever match, even if they were running. The footprints were methodical and patient, showing a creature that was in no rush to leave. This is a key detail because it shows these beings are territorial and highly intelligent. They know how to use tools, like throwing stones, to defend their space without ever having to show their faces. The hunter packed his gear and left as fast as he could, deciding that some parts of Oregon belonged to something else. His story is hands down one of the most credible because of the physical evidence left behind in the mud. Even in the Great Lakes region, the giants are making their presence felt in a terrifying way. Night encounter in the Michigan forest. In the thick woods of Michigan, a 15-year-old boy named Jack and his father were on their annual fishing trip when they had an encounter that would haunt them forever. Jack was out gathering firewood as the sun was starting to set, doing a simple chore he had done 100 times before. The forest was unusually quiet, which is always a bad sign in the wilderness. He saw something big move behind a tree only 30 feet away. At first, he thought it was a black bear, so he started to back away slowly like he was trained to do. But then the figure stood up on two legs and just kept going until it was at least 8 feet tall. It was covered in dark, matted fur, and had a gaze that Jack described as being full of intelligence. The creature did not run away immediately. Instead, it stared at Jack like it was evaluating him, deciding if he was a threat or just a nuisance. Then, it opened its mouth and let out a sound that hit Jack like a physical shockwave. It was a high-pitched shriek that sounded almost like a language, but it was too loud and too powerful for any human throat. It was a sound designed to scare away anything in its path, and it worked perfectly. Jack's primal instincts kicked in, and he managed to snap a quick photo on his phone just as the creature turned and smashed through the heavy brush. The sound of it leaving was like a bulldozer moving through the trees, snapping thick branches like they were toothpicks. The photo Jack took is now famous among Bigfoot researchers because it shows clear muscle definition and a body shape that does not match any known animal. The shoulders are too broad and the arms are too long for it to be a person in a suit. Plus, the way the light hits the fur proves it is a real biological animal. Jack and his father did not wait around to see if it would come back. They packed their entire camp in record time and drove home in total silence. They never went back to that lake again. See, that is the deal with these encounters. Once you see the truth, you can never look at the woods the same way again. It is a reminder that we are not always the top of the food chain when we step off the beaten path. The most chilling part is that they might be watching us even when we think we are alone. Dark shape watching from concealment. Every piece of evidence we have looked at so far is intense, but this final account is the one that really gets under your skin. It involves a man who thought he was having a perfect day in nature, but the reality was much darker. This man was a professional photographer who spent most of his life in the outdoors. He was experienced, calm, and knew how to navigate remote areas without breaking a sweat. He loved taking high-definition pictures of rare birds and ancient trees in places where most people never step foot. On this specific day, he decided to explore a new section of forest that felt untouched by civilization. For an entire hour, he moved through the trees, feeling completely peaceful and alone. He never heard a single branch snap, he never smelled anything weird, and he never felt like he was being watched. But here is the catch. His feelings were totally wrong. When the photographer finally got home and started reviewing his work on a large high-definition monitor, his heart nearly stopped. He was zooming in on a shot of a rare woodpecker when he noticed something in the upper right corner of the frame. There, partially hidden behind the thick trunk of a massive oak tree, was a dark, fur-covered figure. It was not a blurry mess or a trick of the light. It was a solid, massive creature with thick hair and a heavy frame. As he scrubbed through the rest of his shots from that hour, the figure appeared again and again. Sometimes it was just a shoulder, or a piece of a head peeking out from behind a cedar tree. Other times, it was standing in the deep shadows of the undergrowth, perfectly still. This is a key detail because it proves these creatures are absolute masters of stealth. For 60 minutes, a giant that weighs at least 800 pounds managed to stay completely silent and invisible to a person who was literally looking through a professional camera lens. Basically, this was not just a random sighting where a creature happened to be nearby. This was a deliberate act of surveillance. The creature was tracking him from tree to tree, staying in his blind spot with a level of skill that is hands down terrifying. Yeah, about that, it suggests an intelligence that we usually only see in highly trained human scouts. What most people do not realize is that a creature of this size should be making a ton of noise. We are talking about dry leaves, snapping twigs, and the sound of heavy breathing. But this thing moved like a ghost through the Oregon wilderness. It was studying the man, perhaps wondering what his metal equipment was, or if he was a threat to its territory. The photographer realized that he had been less than 50 feet away from a massive predator for an hour and never had a single clue. It really makes you wonder how many times you have been watched while hiking or camping without ever knowing it. The crazy part is how this fits into the bigger picture. So, here's the deal. The evidence from these 7 accounts paints a picture of a creature that is intelligent, tactical, and perfectly adapted to hide from us in plain sight. These are not just myths from old books. They are a reality that lives right on the edge of our civilization. Whether it is the resignation of the 3 scientists in Alberta who could not explain what they saw, or the rock-throwing giants that protect their hunting grounds in Oregon, the proof is becoming impossible to ignore. We are sharing the wilderness with something much older and much stronger than we are. It is a species that understands the forest better than any human ever could. They know our blind spots, they know our technology, and they know exactly how to stay one step ahead of us. And get this, the photographer did not go back to that forest for a long time. He said the thought of being studied like an animal in a zoo was enough to keep him indoors. It is not that simple though, because once you know they are out there, every shadow starts to look a little bit different. The next time you find yourself alone in the woods, remember these stories. You might feel like you are by yourself in the peaceful silence of nature, but the high-definition cameras and the massive footprints suggest that you are almost never truly alone in the dark. The forest has eyes, and they have been watching us for a very long time. It is a sobering thought that while we are busy taking pictures of birds, something much larger is taking our measure from the shadows. Secret rulers of the North Woods. Everything we have discussed so far leads to a single, mind-bending conclusion that most people are simply too afraid to voice out loud. What most people do not realize is that we might not be looking at a simple animal at all, but a parallel version of humanity that has mastered the physical world in ways our technology never will. For starters, think about the hair samples and footprints that always seem to lead to a dead end. There are still many rumors on the air, but what many can confirm is that these beings might possess a form of biological cloaking. This is a key detail because it would explain why a creature weighing 800 pounds can stand 30 yards away from a hiker and remain completely invisible until the footage is reviewed on a monitor. Scientists who resigned from the Alberta case might have realized that the creature on the screen was not just a primate, but something that can manipulate its own light signature. Yeah, about that. Imagine a fur structure that acts like fiber optics, bending the forest colors around its body so that it becomes a ghost in broad daylight. This is why we never find their dens or their remains. They might literally be fading into the environment at a cellular level. But here is the catch. The intelligence shown in the Michigan Shriek and the Oregon rock attack suggests a tactical mind that is hands down superior to any known predator. It is not that simple though, because some researchers are starting to believe these giants are the reason for the thousands of unexplained disappearances in our national parks every single year. The crazy part is that they might be using infrasound, a low-frequency noise that can cause humans to feel intense dread, nausea, or even temporary paralysis. This would explain why the hiker in the forest felt frozen in place, and why his brain screamed at him to run while his muscles refused to move. Basically, they are not just hiding, they are using acoustic weapons to keep us away from their core territories. Some wild theories even suggest that these creatures are the guardians of a massive underground network of caves that spans the entire continent, which is why they appear and disappear like they are walking through walls. And get this, some experts are whispering about a secret agreement between world governments and these elusive giants. It sounds like something out of a movie, but what many can confirm is that certain areas of the Pacific Northwest and the Canadian wilderness are permanently closed to the public for no clear reason. The theory is that these are sovereign territories where we are not allowed to step foot. If a massive 8-foot-tall species has lived here for tens of thousands of years, they would have a much better claim to the land than we do. Nobody expected this to happen, but it seems like we are finally reaching a point where their presence is becoming too loud to ignore. The footprints in the mud and the clear images on trail cameras are just the breadcrumbs they are leaving behind as we push further into their last remaining homes. We might be looking at a sister species that chose a path of biological perfection instead of mechanical tools, making them the ultimate masters of the planet. This is a key detail because it changes how we look at every single shadow in the woods. If they can communicate telepathically, as some witnesses suggest, then they already know when we are coming long before we even park our cars. The silence that falls over the forest during an encounter is not just nature being quiet. It is a purposeful shutdown of the environment by a master observer. We are the ones being studied in a global experiment that we do not even understand yet. The truth is standing right in front of us, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to finally be brave enough to look it in the eye. Are we ready to admit these giants are real? Or is the truth too scary for us to handle? Tell us your thoughts below. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.